Hi guys, welcome back to Flatwater Flat Earth. Today we're going to talk again about who controls the world. And I'm putting this out. I've already put out a movie twice now about this that I was sure for me pretty much completely covered the topic. It really it solidified it in my mind. I was positive for sure that it must be the Vatican and the Jesuits that are running the New World Order. So, but I knew that having watched my pieces and thought about it, this is a serious topic that a lot of people put a lot of thought and effort and time into. I'm sure I know that I've spent many a nights pondering this, and I'm sure that many of you have as well. So I knew that when I put out those pieces that they weren't the final uh, absolute proof that finished it off. It was not definitive. And I got quite a few people that commented and said, you know, are you crazy? We all know that it's the Jews. Well, I can now safely say I'd like to go through the reasons why and show you that we know now for sure that it cannot have been the Jews that are running the New World Order. And here's why. So now we're going through these documents presented by Eric John Phelps, and you can think whatever you want to think about Mr. Phelps himself. What I'm pointing at here is the research and the evidence. So I'm going to source from this movie by Mr. Phelps. Hopefully I can find a better version of it because the resolution is so low that we can't read the actual documents. But when you see these pictures and these people, and we're gonna research these parts and make sure that they're correct, and you're gonna see that these are facts that they just can't be irrefuted. They cannot be refuted. These are incontrovertible facts that cannot be refuted. So what I'm gonna start with is you believe. Let's begin with the assumption that it's the Zionist agitators, or that it's the Zionists that are in control of the New World Order. So I've laid out the history of the Jesuits, and I think for most people it's probably pretty clear that it is the Jesuits who have held the reins of power for a much longer time than the Jews, and before the Jews were even any type of a any type of a world power or a country power. So now what everybody cites, every single conspiracist, goes back to Mullen, Eustace Mullins. And the other thing that they source is from encyclopedias that say that the Rothschilds, after Waterloo, were able to take over the English market and own England by, having faster spies and horsemen at the time, supposedly, that they signaled that the English had lost Waterloo, and therefore stocks plummeted and everybody sold, and they were secretly buying them up and at pennies on the dollar, and really England had won, and that's how the Vatican's secured the wealth of an entire nation and the richest nation in the world at that time, supposedly. That may or may not be part of the truth. That could be, that could have happened, okay? But I'm going to show you how even that doesn't matter, how that's really a tiny, insignificant thing compared to the Vatican's wealth. And I'm going to show you how, if you were the Rothschilds and you had done that, and then the other thing that everybody cites, and then they go ahead and do this, they make a movie about themselves. They allow this movie to be made. They're supposedly the richest people on the planet that control, the richest people on the plane that control the wealth of the Federal Reserve. But at the time that this happened, there was no Federal Reserve, and there had been European central banks, and people knew how bad they were, and that's why we had the Boston Tea Party. Anyways, that's another tangent. So what we have is you've got the Rothschilds making a movie where they describe their plan to take over the world in so many words if you're reading between the lines. So now a lot of people are going to say, well, what about, come on, man, what about the Protocols of Zion? And fair enough, that's something that I debated as well. Now, the Protocols of Zion, we can go back into the history of them here. Eric John Phelps will go over that as well, about the history of the protocols and how they're called a fraud, or they're actually called, they were legally determined to be a forgery. And it's interesting what the history of that forgery is, and Eric will go into that. Eric John Phelps will go into that, about how it was the something de Bourges or de Bourg, and the protocols of the learned elders of the de Bourg family. And I can't remember the exact name. That's what you'll see. He'll get into it. And you can see that they had run that exact scam before, that exact scenario before, and it had worked. And that's how they formulated the protocol.
It was important that the Jesuit win the Bolshevik Revolution. Benedict XV, an ex-Jesuit Pius XI, advised by his Jesuit confessors, began discreetly to negotiate with the Bolsheviks. Cardinal Gasperi, the Secretary of State, had warned that the victory of Orthodox Tsarist Russia, to whom France and England had made so many promises, would be for the Vatican a disaster greater than the Reformation. The Jesuits were behind the Bolshevik Revolution. That's why they reinstituted and brought in the Jesuits. And that's why they changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. And the Gregorian calendar was devised by a Jesuit, Christopher Clavius. Next. This is very important. The Jews, again, did not write the protocols. The protocols were written by the Jesuits at the time of the Dreyfus Affair, and this is according to the great Leo Lehman, who was an Irish priest who later was converted to Christ, as I mentioned, started a missionary to Catholics in New York. This Leo Lehman conducted a court proceeding on behalf of American priests and bishops in the Pope's court called the Sacred Rota, and he conducted this process against the Jesuits. Leo Lehman knew the Jesuits like the back of his hand. Here's what he said. Although first published in Russia in 1903, the Protocols of Zion had their origin in France and date from the Dreyfus Affair, of which the Jesuits were the chief instigators. Yes, the chief of the general staff, his confessor was a Jesuit of the Dreyfus Affair. These protocols of supposedly Jewish leaders are not the first documents of their kind fabricated by the Jesuits. For over 100 years before these protocols appeared, the Jesuits had continued to make use of a similar fraud called the Secrets of the Elders of Bourg-Fontaine. The Secrets of the Elders of Bourg-Fontaine against Jansenism, an anti-Jesuit French Catholic movement among the secular clergy. Yeah, those Catholics they were Bible believers. They believed the Bible to be the final authority of faith and practice. So the Jesuits hated them. Later had a bull passed against the Jansenists. But they put out this Secrets of the Elders of the Bourg-Fontaine prior to the protocols. Next. The French Revolution and the Russian Revolutions are identical. Therefore, the authors are the same. Both revolutions were based on communist writings of Freemasons. Both revolutions plundered the state churches. Both revolutions ended the monarchies. Both revolutions produced Jesuit republics. Both revolutions declared atheism as a religion of the state. Both revolutions carried out a reign of terror by an inquisitional secret police. They were both identical. In fact, when there was still the Iron Curtain, if you went into East Germany, they had a big museum up to communism and said that it started with the French Revolution, 1789. Next. Okay, the Bolshevik revolutions take place. The Bolsheviks are in power. The instruments of this new alliance between the Soviets and the Vatican were to be the Jesuits. This is out of priest James Atko's great work, Descent into Darkness, 1965. Reportedly, there were and had been for a considerable time large numbers of representatives of the Jesuit order in Moscow, including Bishop Edward Rupp. Okay, so the Jesuits were working in conjunction with their Bolshevik servants and the papacy. And I believe they set up a secret concordat, and that's why we had all this mass murder of the Russian Orthodox people.
Now, what you have to think about here is, who were the Jews? Okay, we know who the Vatican was. We know where their power came from, how they have held that power for centuries, if not millennia. And then we know that this ragtag band of guys, this family, supposedly created the Jewish conspiracy and the Zionists from their small family of 5 brothers, the Rothschild brothers, that went and took over their positions in the banks of all of Europe, in the biggest banks of the world, and that they would, well, and you'll see it in the movie there.
Come close. Much money is lost through sending gold by coach from one country to another. In times of war, it is seized by the enemy. In times of peace, by thieves. You are 5 brothers. I want you each to start a banking business in a different country. One to go and open a house in Paris, one in Vienna, one in London. Choose the most important centers, so that when money is to be sent from here to London, let us say, you won't have to risk life and gold. Amschel, here in Frankfurt, will just send a letter to Nathan in London saying, pay so-and-so. And that will be offset by loans from London to Frankfurt. Understand?
Yes.
In your day, there will be many wars in Europe. And nations that have money to transport will come to the Rothschilds because it will be safe. One family, the Rothschilds, who work always together.
And so now you have to ask yourself, okay, read the protocols, and anybody can see that it's a genius work, that the things that are written into it are what have happened, and it is the way that society has gone. It's like a blueprint for the New World Order. But now what I need you to consider is, how did these Jews, these Rothschild family, how did they devise, where, at what time, at what period in history did they devise this master plan to rule the world? You see, you don't come up with a document like that without serious trial and error and practice. Practice makes perfect. And unless it was sent from a divine messenger or from on high, I fail to see how these guys would have just sat down and wrote out these genius rules for how to rule the world. And where would that expertise have come from? How did these Rothschilds suddenly pull up this expertise, this international intrigue expertise, spy expertise, political assassinations and machinations, and the expertise of organization, this expert system? Where did they develop this system? And that's just it. They didn't develop any system. This has been the plan for a long time, to lay this out for you. And the proof is in, people believe Eustace Mullins, and they believe the movie, and they believe the encyclopedia that just says, yeah, the Rothschilds took over the Vatican wealth. They became the papal holders of the papal treasure. And now the Vatican is, now the Rothschilds somehow run the world and run the New World Order. And they've invented this master stroke, this genius plan to take over the world. And they did all this when? So now we're going to have to go into the Federal Reserve. How did these Rothschilds, these Jews, infiltrate the United States in the late 1800s and control the political aspirations of that entire nation, and control the political scenery of that entire nation for more than 50 years or 30 to 40 years to put in the Federal Reserve. They didn't. It was not Bolshevik and it was not Jews. We know that communism and fascism and Bolshevism, or I should say communism and fascism, are really more fitting with the papal plan or with the papal desires for world domination and for an absolute authority without question. Where does that come from? That comes from the Jesuit order.
But a Protestant used to be someone who protested the papal power and who believed the Bible to be the final authority of faith and practice. These were deemed heretics by the Vatican and determined to be killed. The term liberal includes Roman Catholics who believe freedom of speech and freedom of the press, because there are some Catholics who believe that. There are some priests who believe that. And that's why Hitler's Nazi SS put about 2,500 Catholic priests to death, because those Catholic priests resisted the power of the Jesuits' SS. Okay, next. History of Romanism, I feel, is the greatest history ever written on it. It was written in 1845 by a great Berean pastor, John Dowling. Next. In this, he shows how he quotes in the Latin the destruction of the right to private judgment in reading the scriptures. And the liberty of the press is forbidden. Sound familiar? Next. Again, we have the whole Latin quote. The above extracts from the decree need no comment. It is remembered that these prohibitions and penalty were enacted by the last General Council, which written in 1845 was the Council of Trent. The Roman Church, they have never been repealed. The Pope today, whenever any Pope takes the oath of being a Pope, he swears to uphold the Council of Trent today. Next. The fourth session was the most important one, because in this fourth session, that's where they decreed that the Word of God was not the Word of God that I would believe, or most Bible believers, that being the Hebrew Masoretic text and the Greek Textus Receptus, or the Byzantine text. They said the Word of God is the Jerome's Latin Vulgate. Therefore, we have no common ground. Next. The fourth rule, the fourth congregation of the Index of Prohibited Books, enacted by the fourth session of the Council of Trent. approved by Pope Pius VI in a bull issued on the 24th. Inasmuch it is manifest from experience that if the Holy Bible translated into the vulgar tongue be indiscriminately allowed to everyone, the temerity of men will cause more evil than good to arise from it. More evil is going to arise if we have the Bible in our own language. Yeah. And here, and he shall not receive absolution until he first deliver up the Bible. You can't read the Bible pursuant to the Council of Trent. Without the Bible, we have no Western civilization. We have no Constitution. Yes. This was taken from, in 1820 to 29 from a fantastic book called The Jesuit Conspiracy, written by Abate Leon. It's on my disc in the book. You can read the entire book. Dear brethren, the 6 assistants of the Jesuit general, our weapons are of quite different temper from those of the seizures of all ages, and it will not be difficult for us to maneuver as to render ourselves masters of all the powers already so much weakened. We fear no lack of soldiers, only let us apply ourselves to recruiting them from all ranks, from all nations, drilling them into punctual service. But let us, by the same time, be vigilant that no one may suspect our designs. You well know that what we aim is at the empire of the world.
And the Jesuit oaths and the Jesuit organizational scheme, organizational structure that mirrors the Freemasons. It is the same organizational scheme as the Freemasons. And you can see the Freemasons admit openly in their documents that their organizational scheme came from Weishaupt, i.e. came from the creator of the Jesuits, Ignatius Loyola. So we see that the roots of Freemasonry are from the Jesuits. The Jews have not had the historical, political, monetary, or organizational history, structure, and the history of the massive spy network, the incredible global spy net that the Vatican has been running for close to a millennia. The Jews didn't have that. They literally weren't even in control of any nation or any nation of their own up till 1943, 1947, 1963. And so what we can clearly see now is that they have laid this out for us to suck it up as the And then they lay the proof everywhere. So it's so obvious. They put the Jews in power in every single place that they can put them, in the banks, and in every single situation. They put out all this numerology that looks like it's from the Kabbalah. And it's just so perfect in us. I have to say, I believed it. I didn't know. For the longest time, I said it can't be the Jesuits. That's stupid, because I had believed so much in the Zionist evidence. And I remember when people questioned, I'd heard rumors of that Eustace Mullins, that there was something fishy there, and I didn't understand what that was about. Now that's what this is about. That he pulls out that information and harps on it repeatedly. And there is now, for sure, the Zionists do believe that they are a world power. There are people, I'm sure, in their organization who believe that they are running the New World Order, but there's no way that they are. They are absolutely just papal court servants and personnel to the power of the Pope. I'm just trying to lay this out so that you can clearly understand where I'm getting at with this. There is no way. It is not. It's impossible that the Committee of the 300, that the Council on Foreign Relations, that the Royal Institute for International Affairs, that the Fabian Socialists, that the I can just go on with group after group, the Bilderbergs, that any of that those powers are run by the Rothschilds. They're not. The Rothschilds are just the public cog in the wheel. They are there for us to point the finger at and say, the Jews did it. So we look stupid and we look like anti-Semites when we're not, because it's an easy moniker to slap on someone. And that's just another bridge in the way of us ever getting over and getting around this problem and explaining it clearly to the masses, is that so many of the masses will say you're an anti-Semite. So it's clearly part of the plan that they laid out. What you tell me, what world power, I'm going to start a club to rule the world. Pinky in the brain. What are we going to do this morning? Brain, I don't know, Pinky. We're going to make a plan to rule the world, so the first thing you do is, okay, I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to make a club, and we're going to rule the world. So the first thing let's do is go make a movie about it and tell everybody our plans clearly in the movie. And then we'll put out paperwork that clearly lays out exactly the steps that we take to achieve that New World Order, as in the Protocols of Zion. And then we put all these people into public positions with last names like Finkelstein and Greenbaum, or you name it, any Jewish name. And they put all these people into public positions. And then nobody's going to figure out that they've created a plan to rule the world. Like, what a genius plan that is. The Jews don't, and the Zionists don't and didn't have the money or the resources or the technical know-how to come up with a vast scheme and to be able to manipulate nations and manipulate peoples. They don't have the historical precedence or the historical experience to know how to manipulate different nations and different passions of people, to inflame the people, to get them to do their wars and to conduct what they want them to do. The Jews just haven't had that. They don't have the power. They've never had the power to do that. And then, now that's only a thing that's a recent thing within the last 50 to 100 years because of Hollywood. And then that's another thing that we'll look at. Who invented, who really funded, where did Hollywood come from? And again, it goes back to, it's linked again to the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta. You'll always find that these high-level Freemasons will be linked to the Knights of Malta and to the Jesuits. And now what we also need to look at, this is the same time frame, crucial evidence here, that John Surratt and John Wilkes Booth at the Ford Theater, when they killed Lincoln, there's no way, well, we know that it was, do you think Jews killed Lincoln? No, the Vatican killed Lincoln. It's a well-known within the conspiracy world that it was the Vatican. We know that Surratt was found later in the papal Suave Guard. You can see him there. He lived well into a late age. He was well taken care of, lived well into his later days. He was well taken care of by the Vatican and by the Pope for his assistance or his planning and his assassination of Lincoln. And then when we go and look at, now we've got Lincoln, Kennedy, and now we can start to tie this together, combining thread that combines all these people that we know that have been assassinated. And the common thread of them is that they've been decent people that would do their own, they had a mind of their own that would do their own thing and wouldn't follow the Pope or the Black Pope, the Jesuit Pope. The old world order and how it becomes the new world order.
Tonight, they will stay in the shanty of William Lucas. But as they go, they will leave behind one crucial belonging: Booth's jacket, caught on a bush near Gambo Creek. Meanwhile, Colonel Baker has sent the Potter brothers, along with Captain Boyd and Davy Harold, to find Booth.
Loyal or Secesh?
Secesh.
We'll wait. Loyal or Secesh?
Secesh.
Loyal or Secesh?
Secesh.
Loyal or Secesh?
Secesh.
Are as identical as possible, and there's really only one party, and really that party is still owes all of its power back to the Vatican and back to the Jesuits. For a much longer time than the Jews, and before the Jews were even any type of a any type of a world power or a country power. So now, what everybody cites, every single conspiracist, goes back to Mullen, Eustace Mullins. And the other thing that they source is from encyclopedias that say that the Rothschilds, after Waterloo, were able to take over the English market and own England by, having faster spies and horsemen at the time, supposedly, that they signaled that the English had lost Waterloo, and therefore stocks plummeted and everybody sold, and they were secretly buying them up and at pennies on the dollar, and really England had won. And that's how the Vatican's secured the wealth of, and I'm going to source from this movie by Mr. Phelps. Hopefully I can find a better version of it, because the resolution is so low that we can't read the actual documents. But when you see these pictures and these people, and we're going to research these parts and make sure that they're correct, and you're going to see that these are facts that they just can't be irrefuted. They cannot be refuted. These are incontrovertible facts that cannot be refuted. So what I'm going to start with is, you believe, let's begin with the assumption that it's the Zionist agitators, or that it's the Zionists that are in control of the New World Order. So I've laid out the history of the Jesuits, and I think for most people it's probably pretty clear that it is the Jesuits who have held the reins of power. They weren't the final absolute proof that finished it off. It was not definitive. And I got quite a few people that commented and said, are you crazy? We all know that it's the Jews. Well, I can now safely say, I'd like to go through the reasons why and show you that we know now for sure that it cannot have been the Jews that are running the New World Order. And here's why. So now we're going through these documents presented by Eric John Phelps, and you can think whatever you want to think about Mr. Phelps himself. What I'm pointing at here is the research and the evidence. So I'm going to cite an entire nation, and the richest nation in the world at that time, supposedly. That may or may not be part of the truth. That could have happened, okay? But I'm going to show you how even that doesn't matter, how that's really a tiny, insignificant thing compared to the Vatican's wealth. And I'm going to show you how, if you were the Rothschilds and you had done that, and then the other thing that everybody cites, and then they go ahead and do this, they make a movie about themselves. They allow this movie to be made. They're supposedly the richest people on the planet that control, the richest people on the plane that control the wealth of the Federal Reserve. But at the time that this happened, there was no Federal Reserve. And hi guys, welcome back to Flatwater Flat Earth. Today we're going to talk again about who controls the world. And I'm putting this out. I've already put out a movie twice now about this, that I was sure, for me, pretty much completely covered the topic. It really it solidified it in my mind. I was positive for sure that it must be the Vatican and the Jesuits that are running the New World Order. So, but I knew that, having watched my pieces and thought about it, this is a serious topic that a lot of people put a lot of thought and effort and time into. I'm sure I know that I've spent many a nights pondering this, and I'm sure that many of you have as well. So I knew that when I put out those pieces that